The year is 2020. Is Primeval Titan past his prime? Context is king, so today we diagnose where the card remains competitive and where he is eclipsed by other options. Welcome to Cultic Cube, where we cube religiously. We make you better at cube and make your cube better. I have fond memories of that great hulking titan who lowers in the sylvan mist. In the standard formats of 2011 and 2012, I played the heck out of Wolf Run Ramp, a shell in which this card shines. The deck was good, memorable, and unusual for being a base gruel control. Junya Ianaga won Worlds 2011 using the deck, and Brian Kibler defeated Paulo Vito Damaderosa in a 5-game Wolf Run mirror match at Pro Tour Dark Ascension in 2012. Of course, standard and cubedraft are two different animals, indeed two different menageries, and performance in one doesn't guarantee performance in the other. But it is instructive to see why Primeval Titan was key to that deck as we contemplate what the card offers cube designers and players. So today we will highlight reasons why Primeval Titan might be good in one's cube environment. Then we will turn to arguments against his inclusion. Finally, I suggest some cards that might be useful alternatives to Primeval Titan. Primeval Titan does big things. It tutors up lands, it puts them directly into play, and it thereby helps accumulate huge amounts of mana. These abilities are extremely desirable in particular circumstances, while elsewhere they may feel exciting, but may not be especially useful. You may recall that some time ago I made a video about the whole cycle of mythic giants of M11, in which I argued that Primeval Titan is only as good as one's best lands. The example of Wolf Run Ramp is apropos here. Primeval Titan is great in the deck, as it finds the deck's namesake, Kessig Wolf Run, which is itself a mana sink that converts surplus lands into reach. Cavern of Souls combats mana leak, Glimmerpost helps with Hellrider, and most importantly, Inkmoth Nexus acts as a force multiplier for Wolf Run, thanks to poison. When particular lands are key to a strategy, as is clearly the case for Wolf Run Ramp, Primeval Titan handily assembles them, and may earn its place. Cube can offer all sorts of land shenanigans. Land combos of a sort include Dark Depths and Thespian Stage, Crucible of Worlds and Strip Mine, Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, and Mountains. And of course there are plenty of lands that are worth finding, from Creature Lands to Gaia's Cradle to Caracas. Our friend can fix color and turn on a splash. Another reason people like Primeval Titan is that it thins one's deck of lands. This may not sound like a big deal. After all, we are often told that the thinning effect of a fetch land is generally negligible. However, Primeval Titan does improve deck quality if given time. Imagine we get a turn 4 Titan into play. We're making a number of assumptions here, but in a pretty average case, he reduces one's chance of hitting a land by roughly 4% on one's next draw step. Let's look ahead to our turn 6 draw step, after that turn 4 Titan attacks on turn 5 and thins 2 more lands, for a total of 4 now. Now the Titan improves our draw by about 10%. Thus the thinning effect is real, but it is also expensive and slow. I'm certainly not putting Titan in the deck for this effect. It is also worth mentioning that cube players should trim lands aggressively in ramp decks that have adequate inexpensive acceleration, as elves are themselves mana sources. Primeval Titan's thinning effect increases the lower one's land count is. Honestly, still more useful, often, is the fact that Titan shuffles the deck. Anytime that one has access to or knowledge of the top card of one's library, it is useful to have the ability to shuffle it. It used to be that library manipulation was largely the purview of blue. But more and more, other colors, perhaps especially green, can play off the top of the library. Shuffle effects combine well with Brainstorm, Sensei's Divining Top, Vivian, Monster's Advocate, Corsair of Crewfix, and so on. I am not especially high on Primeval Titan, and here's why. First, I don't have many broken lands, or land combos that it helps turn on. Even if I did, I would have to contemplate how valuable a 6 CMC tutor is. Sometimes one has to jump through hoops to set up one's sweet combos, but I prefer to dispense with such assembly early and inexpensively. Second, there are limits to the practicality of Primeval Titan's ramp capabilities. To begin with, I think 6 is an outrageous price for a ramp spell. I badly want my green ramp to cost 1 or 2. I strongly dislike Kodama's Reach and the like at 3, which are too slow in the absence of an elf. Of course, Primeval Titan should not be your first ramp spell. So let us imagine we play a couple of elves, looking to play Titan on 4, and then our opponent sweeps the board. In this scenario, we trade 3 creatures for 2 lands and the opponent's wrath. Our 2 extra lands need to be quite valuable to us for this trade to have been beneficial. I understand the argument that Primeval Titan allows one to pursue a mega ramp strategy. As I have argued in my primer for drafting green, I believe that mega ramp is, in most environments, a strategy that is too chancy. But assuming we want to build the deck, let's define what our goal is. For my purposes, mega ramp means arriving at something like 8 mana. It is generally not a winning strategy to craft a game plan around hard-casting Emrakul, at least not outside of niche environments that support Tron or Eldrazi ramp. Something like Kozilek might sound more reasonable, but while Primeval Titan can absolutely push 1 to 10 mana, notice how long it takes to cast the payoff. If one curves into Titan, one needs to untap and attack with it, and then untap again and cast Kozilek. That gives the opponent too much time and too many resources. In sum, Mega Ramp should dream a little smaller. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for dropping into play big game-ending threats. Rather than aiming to play these fairly though, I want to cheat them into play, with reanimation, natural order, sneak attack, and so on. One might well say that Primeval Titan can be cheated into play as well. While that's true, if one's plan is to cheat a 6/6 into play, one's aspirations in fact sound rather too modest. It is certainly true though that amassing huge amounts of mana can be beneficial for all sorts of reasons. Big X spells are one fine use of big mana. Those early Wolf Run ramp decks often contained 1 or 2 copies of Devil's Play that allowed one to fireball an opponent out of the game. My thanks to you all for sharing your favorite things to do with a very deep mana pool when I put the question to you on Twitter. I love you all's varied ideas, which sound uniformly awesome. I reproduce some of that conversation here. Say Prime Time gets you to 8 available mana. Now you can drop in your Sundering Titan or your Ugin, but you have to have the end game in hand. It is effectively the end of a fragile multi-card combo involving elves into Titan into Wincon. Of course, Titan could allow you to untap and double spell instead of playing one big spell, but how often does one have in hand all the necessary components to get to Titan and still have 2-4 CMC spells in hand? Most of one's hand has typically been expended getting to the Titan. There are ways of drawing cards, or finding cards, to offset these problems, and Green has gotten better at generating card advantage over time. But then we are asking for another class of card to be in hand as well. Third, Primetime just does not do enough on his own. His floor is essentially a Colossal Dreadmaw. A 6/6 Trampler can absolutely win games of Magic, but it is also a component of an uncertain strategy. Opponents will bolt the bird to keep one off Titan for as long as possible. Creature-based ramp risks a disaster from sweepers, and Titan is slow enough to come online that the Titan may well be countered, or the payoff that he hopes to facilitate may be countered. And finally, if Titan is simply vindicated, the value that he has accrued is extremely dependent on deck construction, as we have seen. In sum, there is less difference between Dreadmaw and Titan than some might assume. Those of you who have seen my work know that I badly want my mid-range threats to be harder to interact with, or to build more value, than Primetime often does. Before we chat alternatives to Primetime, allow me to mention that you can support my work in the Cube community in various ways. As little as $1 a month makes you a member of the Patreon community. I am also a TCG player and an Inked Gaming affiliate, so please consider following the affiliate links in the video description when purchasing cards or accessories. Thank you. As I have tried to explain, I think Primeval Titan makes more sense as mid-range top end that can potentially find combo pieces than as a cog in a ramp strategy. I prefer that my mid-range curve end at 5 mana rather than at 6. 5s that grind value, are difficult to interact with, or that provide various forms of card advantage are what I am looking for. Creatures that fit the bill include Biogenic Ooze, Whisperwood Elemental, and Vorapede. Planeswalkers are great too, such as Nissa Vital Force, Vivian Monster's Advocate, Nissa Worldwaker, and Nissa Who Shakes the World. Really and truly, whether I want mid-range top end or a ramp enabler, almost any green 5 CMC walker is more desirable than Primetime. For those who are really sold on 6 mana creatures, options exist. The reigning king of these is, of course, Carnage Tyrant. I completely understand if the dinosaur swings too far for some people toward the uninteractive. People laugh when I mention Honored Hydra, but friends, this Hydra is not one, but 2 colossal Dreadmaws. If it is countered or killed the first time around, the opponent still has to face it down again. It is not uncommon for the mid-range player to ramp out Hydra, only to have the controlling opponent sweep the board clean. Now the mid-range player, despite their elves dying, very likely has enough mana to cast the Hydra from the yard. I don't want to oversell Hydra. How much value it provides over Dreadmaw compared to Primeval Titan depends a great deal on cube design and deck construction. Earthshaker Giant and Great Oak Guardian are miniature Craterhoof behemoths that are actually castable, and that can capitalize on Green's tendency to amass a small army of elves. Despite the similarities evinced by Giant and Guardian, the cards can play quite differently, and both are worth a try. Kogla the Titan Ape was disappointing in my testing, but it is a green Necrotol, which has some value. Cube designers have long clamored for green creatures that fight on ETB, and we are at last getting a few. I've heard it claimed that Cloud Thresher is better than Primeval Titan, which sounds like a hot take to me, but I can imagine circumstances in which it is good. With regard to these last two, 3 and 4 colored mana pips make for a real and onerous requirement on cards that we hope to cast. In sum, I am not arguing that Primeval Titan is a bad card, or that it is aged out of cube. What I would like to emphasize is that as cube designers, we should continually reassess cards for their fitness in our environments. Cards that were once so commonplace as to be sacrosanct have fallen by the wayside over time. This isn't necessarily the case for Primetime in your cube, but nevertheless, the Giant serves as a good test case for the constant reevaluation that we would do well to subject our cards to.